Hello students, hope you are safe and healthy. Today is 2nd May 2020. My name is Priya Khan and I'll be taking your social studies. In our last class, we have briefly discussed about dates and events, periodization of history, that is division of history. In today's class, we will be discussing about the various sources of modern Indian history. So let's get started. Sources of history can be categorized into two, that is primary source and secondary source. Here, a question may come into your mind. What is primary or secondary source? Let me clear your doubt. Primary source are the first-hand records, reports, buildings, etc. that has registered at the time when the event was happening or taking place. Secondary sources are often accounts created by someone who did not experience first-hand or participate in the event or conditions. Examples of primary sources are diary, speech, interview, videotape, autobiography, etc. Examples of secondary sources are newspaper, textbook, biography, encyclopedia, etc. Both provides evidence about history. Moving on, let us understand what help us to know what sources do historians use in writing about the last 250 years of Indian history. Government records. First and very important sources was the records put together by the British administration. The British administration produced several timely and official records which served as the very important source for historians to refer to. The British believed that it was important to put everything on paper, such as every instruction, plan, policy decision, agreement, investigation had to be clearly written down. Once this was done, things could be properly studied and debated as and when required. This led to production of an administrative culture of memos, notes, and reports. The British were also of the opinion that all the important documents and letters needed to be carefully preserved. So they set up record rooms attached to all administrative institutions. The village tax officer's office, the tax officer also known as Tehsildar, the collectorates, the commissioner's office, the provincial secretariats, and the law courts had their own record rooms. Specialized institutions like archives and museums were also established to preserve important records. Now, take a look at this picture. This is the building of the National Archives of India that was built in the 1920s. When New Delhi was built, the National Museum and the National Archives were both located close to the Viceregal Palace. This location was well thought upon by the British. And this reflects the importance this institution had for the British. The archives have the letters, memos that moved from one branches of the administration to another in the early years of the 19th century. Also, the notes and reports that district officials prepared or the instructions and directives that were sent by officials at the top of provincial administrators have also been archived. Now, in the early years of the 19th century, these documents were carefully copied out and beautifully written by calligraphists. Calligraphists are people who specialized in the art of beautiful writing. By the middle of the 19th century, printing techniques had been discovered and were being widely used. Thus, it was possible to produce multiple copies of the administrative records for several people or government departments to use as and when needed. Surveys and mapping. Other than the administrative records, surveys also provide useful note and records information. Surveys prove very useful when information has to be collected and collated in considerably large numbers, and this practice of carrying out surveys also became common under the colonial administration. In other words, we can say that the British were quite methodical bunch. Now, they believed that a country had to be properly known before it could be effectively administered. They started carrying out detailed surveys by the early 19th century to map the entire country. Various kinds of surveys were run to understand the revenue of people living in village, to understand the topography, the soil quality, the flora, the fauna, the local histories, and the cropping pattern. All the facts were seen as necessary in order to administer the region better. These were surveyed and data was collected and stored and used as and when necessary. The British set up botanical gardens and natural history museums. They even collected plant specimen information about their uses. Local artists were asked to draw pictures of this specimen. Today, historians look at these sources to gather information and to understand the nature of colonialism back then. Census. Almost towards the end of the 19th century, a new method were brought into practice. Census operations were held every 10 years. Basically, they were detailed records of the number of people in all the provinces of India, noting information on caste, religion, and occupation. Now, several other surveys were conducted like botanical surveys, geological surveys, archaeological surveys, anthropological surveys, and forest surveys. Several instruments were used for conducting surveys. While surveys are nothing but hard fact to make the administration more effective, they were scientific in nature. Now, building and monuments. The British were also a great builders. They built some of the most magnificent buildings of the time. The building reflected modernization and also their imperialist power. Well, official records are after all just official. From this vast collection of records, we get to know a lot, but we must remember that these are official records. They tell us about what the official thoughts, what they were interested in, and what they wish to preserve for posterity. This record doesn't always help us understand what the large section of the population, that is, the public, felt, what their emotions were, and the reason behind some of their action. And for that, we need to look elsewhere. Let's see what are the forms in which the perspective of the other side is available. We have diaries of people, accounts of pilgrims and travelers, autobiographies of important personalities, and popular booklets that were sold in the local bazaars. As printing emerged and spread as a form of communication, newspapers were published, issues were debated, leaders and reformers wrote to spread their ideas, poets and novelists wrote to express their feelings. Now, films. Another important source of information was the films produced during 19th century, which were based on social causes like casteism, exploitation of women, and patriotism. All these films act as an important source of information as they capture the prevailing mood of the society and existing social and cultural norms. So, students, these were some of the primary and secondary sources through which we came to know about modern Indian history. With this, we come to an end of chapter number 1. In our next video, we will start our next chapter, that is chapter number 2, the establishment of company rule. That's all for today. See you in the next class. Till then, stay home, stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you.